Coming up next on Another View, avoiding the dreaded holiday creep. You know, when the eggnog, the pies, the turkey, the dressing, the cake go in and the pounds stay on. For everyone watching their weight, 'tis the season for spreading. But does it have to be? Hi, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Dr. Keith Newby is here to share strategies on keeping your weight in check and keeping your heart healthy while you celebrate the season. It can be done. Stay tuned to find out how right after this news from NPR.
Discussing today's topics from an African American perspective, this is Another View.
And good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. It's Another View on Health Day, the fourth Friday of the month, where we talk about issues that affect your health. My trusty co-host, cardiologist Dr. Keith Newby, is here in the studio with me. Hi, Keith.
How are you?
I'm doing great.
Good.
Can't wait for our conversation today. But before we get started, we would like to send out a very, very special congratulations to the Pearl Bailey Library as Best After School Arts and Humanities program. They are being honored by First Lady Michelle Obama this afternoon at 2 o'clock for their program. It celebrates the creativity of America's young people, particularly those from underserved communities, and that ceremony is at the White House at 2 o'clock this afternoon. The Pearl Bailey Library is located on Wickham Avenue in Newport News, which is in the southeast part of the city. And they're doing some marvelous things in that area. Absolutely. So congratulations to everyone associated with the Pearl Bailey Library. And that honor. That is great. And the other thing I'd like to do before we get into the show is to talk about the fabulous time that I had last Saturday at the Medicare Health Fair and Expo put on by Senior Services of Southeastern Virginia. We had a great time, 2 outstanding panel discussions on the future of healthcare in America and in Virginia. There were lots of breakout sessions. And best of all, thank you to everyone who took the time to come up and tell me how much you enjoy Another View. It is so good to hear from people. You know, it's always a one-way street on our end, right?
Well,
so we really appreciate everyone listening.
So how do you find time to do all this stuff? Because every time I look around,
I don't know.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm going to have to take notes from you then.
I tell you, my calendar really is pretty full, but we try to make it happen. So to those of you who were there last week, thank you so much for coming up. And it's just so nice to put faces with the voices that we hear on the radio. So today we have 2 things to talk about. We're going to talk about avoiding the holiday creep, those extra pounds we put on during the holidays, and we'll get to that in a moment. But first, I'd like to welcome to Another View Dr. John Chittick, who is no stranger to Another View. He continues his work combating HIV/AIDS in Hampton Roads, and he's joining us by phone. Hi, Dr. Chittick. How are you?
Good, Barbara, and you're?
Good.
You fine?
We're
Good?
doing great. We are doing great. So I read this statistic this morning that said that African American teens are 15% of the population, yet account for 68% of all new AIDS cases. And you've got an event going on next Friday, the 29th, to try to combat that, don't you?
Yes. What we're going to do, World AIDS Day is December 1st. That's a Sunday. So instead, we're doing this on Friday, Black Friday, down at MacArthur Square by the Tide Station in front of Dillard's. And what it's going to be is for 2 hours, we're going to be reading off the names of people, loved ones that have died, but we're also going to be testing young people. And that's they have to be 17 to 23, and depending on the amounts of money we raise, that's how many kits I can buy for them. But these are public demonstrations, and my whole crew that's coming with me are all volunteers. A number are African American and are very concerned about what's happening to their younger, especially high school age cohort. They're very concerned about what's going on.
Remind us, Dr. Chittick, for those who may not know now, Teen AIDS Peer Corps, that is your group that you work with teen peers, to help educate other teens about HIV/AIDS, right?
Yes, it's a model that I developed at Harvard University, and then I've practiced it and tested it about 86 countries now around the world. The whole concept is we don't pay anybody. I'm not paid. None of the volunteers, of course, are paid, the interns, but they're empowered to go out and talk to their friends and talk to their peers by convincing them that there are very big dangers out there, but with some common sense and with knowledge, they can help make sure they don't get HIV/AIDS, and they can prevent it in their future partners and babies. That's what I'm also concerned about.
And I read on your website there were the ABCs of HIV/AIDS prevention. Can you run through those real quick?
Well, A stands for abstinence, and I have to explain to this. This is not a moral argument for me. What I say to young people is, if you can postpone sex as long as possible, you'll be better off. You don't need to rush into it. What I'm finding now in Norfolk and this area is the kids 13, 14 are starting sex. By 16, the majority of all teens have begun sex. You can't put the cap back onto in the bottle. It's escaped. The kids are doing this. B stands for be faithful, or monogamy. And what I try to do is explain, look, if you are going to choose to have sex, then you must try as best as possible to be monogamous. Don't have extra partners, because that's where the danger comes from. And C stands for condoms. And while condoms are not 100% reliable, they're like 99%, it's the best medical barrier we have to prevent HIV. So I tell kids the option, and then I say, look, you choose. It's your responsibility to decide what you want to do. Okay,
so World AIDS Day 2013 is Friday, November the 29th from 11 until 1 at the MacArthur Square Tide Station in Norfolk. And if they want more information, what do they need to do, Dr. Chittick?
Well, the best thing is to go to the website, which is teenaids.org. Or for this week, they can call the office number. Is it all right if I leave it?
Yes, sure.
757-352-2055. I'll repeat the last, 352-2055. I should be here, or somebody will be here to answer the questions. And Barbara, I have one last comment, and that is thank you very much for publicizing this, because it's fallen off the radar with most news media. And the fact that we're doing public testing of teens, it's never been done anywhere else in the country before. This is the first time what we're doing in Hampton Roads. So it's important to end the AIDS stigma on testing, and that's what we're doing. So thank you very, very much.
You are very welcome, Dr. Chittick. That's Dr. John Chittick with Teen AIDS Peer Corps, and that event, again, will be posted on our website, anotherviewradio.org. It is Friday, November the 29th from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. You know, those numbers and the early starting of sex and so forth, that's just really surprising, isn't it, Keith?
When you hear about it, I remember it was one of those shows, I think it was a Law and Order Special Victims Unit. I saw one time they were talking about these kids doing this stuff at 11 and 12 years old, and I said, well, that's got to be media. Then you find out this
that is not media.
That's not media. It's
reality.
It is. But I guess it goes back to that parental guidance, and unfortunately, so some of these kids are growing up on their own, and they're not. The parents aren't exactly as involved as they could be. I mean, I'm trying to be politically correct as Dr. Chittick was. But unfortunately, so that's where a lot of it begins if they're not there.
If they don't have the guidance ahead of time.
68%.
68%. Yeah, that's a scary number. Yeah. All right, let's move on over to this holiday creep thing, because, next Thursday is Thanksgiving, and everybody, I read somewhere where someone said, just wear sweats. Just don't even try. Just wear sweats. You have the nice comfort around the middle, and you'll go for the food. But there are some things that we can do even through this holiday period and still enjoy it, plus stay heart healthy.
Well, I think what happens a lot of times is people just take it to the next level. They doing the one day, and I just tell when patients bring this up, I always say, listen, a lot of it's being sensible. I don't ever tell them don't. Because if you're in front of all this food, and you go to a family event or whatever, and you got all this stuff sitting in front of you, it's going to be hard for a lot of times, because we do fellowship based on what we eat and what the family we're around, the friends we're around, and you get all this stuff in front of you, it's going to be hard for you to turn it down. And I tell them all the time, I say, listen, just be sensible with how much of it you have. realizing your different food groups and notice it didn't make it all on the sweet potato pie and the.
That's the good stuff.
Yeah, I mean it is, but I say don't make it all that. Say okay, if you're going to get a piece of that, just don't get as big a piece and just keep it sensible. But it's the aftermath. I mean, because you're not going to gain but so much on a day. But what happens is people take that and they
extend that Thanksgiving through New Year. I heard a statistic that on average between Thanksgiving and New Year's, the average American gains 15 pounds.
Oh, I can believe that.
That's
Do you think
a lot
about
of weight.
Because you ever look at eggnog? You ever just
no,
look
at the ingredient? No, absolutely not. Because then I will never put it in my mouth again.
It's just you even think how thick it is coming out
I know,
that
and it's
container.
delicious.
Yeah, but if you look at the calorie content, I mean, and I always tell people, look at the label because if nothing else, you may get mad at me for asking you to do that, but in the end, you'll put it back down because, oh, yeah, that's too much. So, I mean, a lot of times it's all about how much, and that's what I tell people all the time.
Control.
Yeah, portion control. So
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call. Give us a call and let us know how you're planning to maintain at least your weight through this holiday season. What are your tips for not going overboard? 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. So the key then is maybe pick out on Thanksgiving Day, but then send the rest of the stuff out of the house from there.
Something, because when you really think about it, I tell you what I always tell people the best thing to do, if you can, is if you really curtail your food intake, like say now, and you say, okay, I'm really going to cut back and not eat as much on any day between now and Thursday. What's going to happen is, they say like your stomach shrinks, so to speak. You're not used to eating that much. So the day you have Thanksgiving, you're going to want a lot, but you're not going to be able to eat a lot. And that will help kind of curtail it real quick because you're going to get full very quick because you cut back so much, the week before, that by the time you get to that day, your eyes are going to be bigger than what your stomach can hold. And that's actually okay because at least you won't eat as much, So I tell everybody, you just get a little bit of everything, but just take a step back.
I heard about a study. There were two college groups, and one college group was told that they could eat as much as they wanted, but they could only go to the table one time. So pile your plate as high as you can.
Right.
The other group was told you can go back to the table as much as you want, but none of your food can touch on the plate. And the people who could go back as often ate less than the people who piled their plate the one time.
I can see that because it's always a clean your plate phenomena. You really think about it because if you got it piled up, you're going to eat almost all of it.
Eat all of it.
But if you have to you got to keep going back up. You probably would be a little bit less likely to eat, but so much.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Laura joins us from Virginia Beach. Hi, Laura. You in the air?
Hi. Yeah, I like that idea of walking back and forth for smaller portions. It kind of gets you moving, gives your body a chance to think about, help you feel a little more full.
And that should give you time to say, do I really need that other piece of cake?
You got it. I have been working the Weight Watchers program since April 2011. I've come from 270-odd pounds down to 205, and I want under 200 so bad I can taste it.
Congratulations. That's great.
Oh, thank you. I'm working hard. And one of my favorite strategies for Thanksgiving, because I'm in the kitchen all day, is I like to keep a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables handy because you can fill up on those. And then the heavier foods, you just need a little taste of.
Ah, okay.
And it's more satisfying.
So you really are at a point where if you just taste it, then you're okay with it. You don't have to eat the whole pie for that complete satisfaction. I'm trying to get there.
Well, I don't know if you've ever noticed this. I've found when I first started eating less of the fattier foods, the fried food, I really miss the French fries. And the first French fry or two I eat tastes so good. But by the fifth one, they start to taste kind of the same. And so I really savor that best flavor of those first couple. And then it's easier to let go once that's been met. That works for me.
Okay. Well, we appreciate you sharing that with us, Laura, and happy Thanksgiving to you.
Thanks. Happy Thanksgiving to you, too.
Thank you. Okay. Let's see. Heather joins us from Norfolk. Hi, Heather. You're on the air.
Hi, Barbara. I was calling to say, let's enjoy the feast and everything all the foods that all of our friends and family bring to that table, and give thanks for our family and friends, and then go for a walk with your friends, shoot hoops, throw the football, get a little exercise, and then come back and take a nap. and I also wanted to give my blessing and a moment of silence for those wonderful 68% of young people who will find out that they have AIDS or are facing that crisis right now in their families, to hold hands and give thanks for them and for their future health and healing.
Okay, Heather, thank you for that. We really appreciate your phone call and that kind comment on that. That statistic is just jarring, and I think it just really affects a lot of people. So the other part, though, Keith, in terms of the holidays, beyond our eating and having fun and laughing and talking, is the whole idea of using this time to find out about our family history.
Yeah, we talked about that before.
Yeah, and why is that important?
Well, I think like anything else, if you understand the background in your family, it helps in terms of preparation for you in the future. One of the comments we made on the prior show, we talk about risk factors for heart disease, and one of the risk factors is family history, and that is a genetic predisposition. But even go beyond heart disease, breast cancer, colon cancer. A lot of times, we've gotten to where, and my wife comments to me about this all the time. She's been disappointed with how families are. Once upon a time, families were really, really, really close, and you have these holidays, these sessions, and family would get together. We really would spend that time together. That doesn't happen as much as it used to, so then people become somewhat distant, so they don't really know these family historical features. If you find out that you did have an aunt or uncle that had breast cancer before they were 40, your risk is higher. If you have 5 people in the family that are close relatives that all have had heart attacks when they were younger, that may come up in conversation. If it does, and you start to really understand what your family history is really like, which can help you prepare, because you'll know.
So heart disease is hereditary?
Yeah, most definitely. If you look at, but a lot of times what people don't really understand, though, say like example, your father had a heart attack and he was 75, or 80 years old. Well, that's different from if he was 40. The genetic predisposition really was, I guess by definition, is if you're a first-degree relative, mother, father, brother, sister, having heart disease before age 55 or 55 or less. That's where the genetic predisposition comes in. Now, look beyond that. Hypertension. Now, you're going to see a lot more of that. If a lot of people in the family have hypertension, a lot of people in the family have diabetes, you will be more apt to develop that, and you need to know if that's the case, because again, it lets you start looking. When you go to the doctor's office, a lot of times we're going and we say, "Oh, we're fine, no issues," and when some people say, "Well, why do we got to check blood work? Why do we have to do that?" Because a lot of those disease processes are asymptomatic. So if you have diabetes, you may not know. A lot of people thinking, well, I don't urinate a lot, or if I do urinate a lot, or I have these headaches, that means I have high blood pressure. Or if I urinate a lot, that means I have diabetes. But most of type 2 diabetics don't feel anything. So if you don't know your sugar is high because you're not getting it checked, you won't know. And then all of a sudden, these Thanksgiving feasts become more problematic because you're going to be eating a lot of that stuff that's going to just throw your sugar through the roof, and crazy. Your blood pressure. We talked about this issue of the heart attack and stroke risk, and that we bring this up before Thanksgiving because people need to understand really how this impacts. Talk about sodium, carbohydrates. The sodium part really impacts on that blood pressure. And one of the things that there was a study done, and I may have brought this up before, but there was a study done a few years ago looking at what impacts on blood pressure. And the reason why we talk about that food problem or salt or sodium problem, if you take a teaspoon of salt, it's 2,500 milligrams of sodium. And there
one teaspoon, 2,500.
2,500.
Okay.
So they say that if you take that teaspoon, now I would never recommend this, but if you were to eat that teaspoon of salt, I know.
But you know what? When you really think about it, when people just grab the salt shaker before they even taste the food, you probably do eat that much.
You'd be surprised how much it turns out to be once you start shaking. But they say that teaspoon of salt chase it with some water and check your blood pressure an hour later. And there was a study looking at how it impacted. A lot of people, their blood pressure went up 40 points.
Wow.
40 to 50 points, just 1 teaspoon of salt. So if you're 120, you go up to, 170. And, of course, it would kind of falter down or kind of come down after a while, but that takes a while. Look at that all day long. Yeah. I mean, that's, and again, people tell me all the time, well, I never shake salt on my food. Yeah, but look at the labels on the food you're eating. If a lot of these foods have a ton of sodium in it because of this preservative portions and all this, that, that amount of sodium, it could be 5-6 grams, a day, minimum. I mean, some people up to 10, 11 grams of sodium a day and wonder why their blood pressure's high. I can tell you, a living hypertensive crisis.
Wow.
So that stuff plays a factor, and that impacts on your health when you're talking about being at somebody's house. Because I joke on my family all the time. I say, listen, you come to my house, you got high blood pressure, you can't have it so much because you're not going
to let them eat?
We are not going to be called at 911. No 911 calls while you're at my house.
It must be really kind of interesting, though, in your family with so many doctors in your family that you all, those who may not be doctors are like, oh, Lord, here they go again.
Well, something interesting, my brother and I, when we go places like that, we don't even talk that much about it. We'll get hit up. Your family always hits you up about, I got this pain over here. But we don't, neither one of us really bring it up a lot when we're having this. I mean, I joke around about this, but we tend to be quiet, when we go to family gatherings, but we'll get hit up for a lot of questions. But, I mean, we try our best to, really, when we're at family gatherings, we're family. We don't get into the whole doctor.
But you really should pay some attention to the conversation that's going on, because you can learn a lot about your family. And when someone said, because in another area where, particularly in African American community families, there's not a lot of discussion about mental health also. Yeah. But then when you're sitting around the table and somebody's talking about old Uncle Joe who he used to do such and such. I mean, you learn things through the stories that are told.
I'm 100% in agreement with that, and that's really the downside with the families not being as close as we used to be.
Absolutely,
because you miss out on a lot of those things, and they can impact. It impacts on your children, because if you don't know, because again, it's all about education. The more you know, the more you can teach them, the more they'll know, and they can.
And the more they can keep spreading the word. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. We're talking about heart health today, and we're also talking about ways to avoid gaining weight during the holiday season, and why that is so important, because you want to remain healthy. Dr. Newby, there were two new studies done this week. The first one I want to talk about is the one on the fact that they went and looked at men in their 50s who had heart attacks outside of the hospital, and found that a grand majority of them had symptoms like at least a month ahead of time. Let's talk about the symptoms of heart attack again, and then why are we not paying attention? Okay,
essentially because avoidance is bliss, and we look at, that's human nature. I've come to find that, man. If you really think about it, if you don't think about it, it doesn't exist. And a lot of times we'll say, oh, well, I won't worry about this. I'll be okay. It's just gas. It's just this, that, the other. And I tell people all the time, look at your risk factors. That will help you to really understand what your relative risk is. I mean, if you're an 18-year-old, with no history of anything, and that's different from if you're a 55-year-old that has every risk factor. There is the heart problems, and those risk factors are as follows, and we talked about this before, but just to kind of regroup and bring this back up, it would be hypertension, diabetes, cholesterol elevations, people, with family history, smokers, and there's another risk factor that we bring up now. It's two, really. It's obesity and poor mobility, or people that don't exercise, inactivity. And that's actually now a documented risk factor for heart disease.
So if you sit too long, that is a documented risk factor.
Yeah, and I tell people all the time, and pushing a remote control button is not exercise. I think they're moving that thumb. That's not doing it. But that really plays a big factor, and we've gotten away from that. This is a technology age, your iPhones, iPads, you got this, that, the other. You push a button, everything comes on, so you no longer have to move. Kids nowadays, they sit around watching, playing video games and working on the computer, whereas when we were growing up, we were out in the streets,
that's right, running and ripping and playing.
Around. So that's the new wave. I do believe this to be true, and this issue of the sudden death events, which oftentimes are caused by coronary disease. The thing I try to caution people is, out of hospital cardiac arrest, if your heart stops outside the hospital, your risk of death is going to be 90%. I mean, wow. Because you got to think about it. What happens when someone has a cardiac arrest? Number one, you got 7 minutes to reestablish blood flow to the brain before you get permanent brain damage. So you have to, so when somebody falls out, depending on how well trained people are around you, the first thing they're going to do is start shaking you. What's wrong? And, they're not going to necessarily, unless they're ACLS trained or BLS trained, they're not going to really think. Then they're going once they kind of come to a conclusion something's wrong, you probably got a couple of minutes gone right there. Then they got to call 911.
You got to wait for 911.
And then some of the people don't know how to do CPR, so you're steadily losing brain tissue while that's going on. Plus the fact that the heart, the longer that stays in a dangerous rhythm, the less likely you're going to be to get that person out. So, you have to go taking all those things into consideration. It really plays a factor. That's why I tell everybody, if they understand their risk, if their family, their immediate family understands their relative risk for heart problems, then they may recognize things faster and be able to implement treatment quicker.
If you're just joining us, we're talking with Dr. Keith Newby about heart health and also surviving the holidays in terms of our weight. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call. What questions do you have about keeping your heart healthy? Give us a call, 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. So they were saying that there was some sort of warning, something that happened to these men a month out or so forth. So what kinds of things should we be paying attention to? Is it the pain in the left arm and things of that sort?
Well, most of the time, a lot of people think just because the pain in the left arm that immediately signifies that that's a heart problem. And I always say it's better to ask the question. Don't assume anything. But most situations it's going to be pretty clear. I mean, they're going to have chest discomfort, and that's what you find more commonly than anything else. There's going to be some kind of discomfort they have in their tightness, squeezing. A lot of people won't say it's pain. They say, well, it's uncomfortable feeling or it's tight. And I hear that more than anything else. But it's usually in conglomeration with other things. They're either lightheaded, dizzy, short of breath. It won't necessarily just be one symptom. But, the thing is, to me, if that's out of context of what you felt before, somebody would tell me, well, I had this pain in my chest and I just assumed it was gas. And I asked them, I said, why'd you assume that? And they said, well, because it was hurting. I said, well, had you just eaten anything? No. I said, well, what makes you think it's gas? I said, don't take that, then make that assumption. Now, again, I always say, look at your risk factors. If you have chest discomfort, and say that you're 19 years old with no other medical problems, okay, I'm with you. But say you're 60 and you have high blood pressure, diabetes, you smoke, and you have high cholesterol, and then you have chest pain. I mean, I'm going to look at that much more seriously than I'm going to look at that 19-year-old. You take everybody serious, but you know that the relative risk is a lot higher.
So do you have time to make an appointment to go see you as a private doctor, or should you go to the emergency room?
I think if you're having prolonged pain, I tell people all the time, it's one thing if you have pain for 5 minutes and it goes away, just as fast as it came. I'm like, you don't necessarily have to rush to see somebody then, but I think it's important for you to recognize there may be an issue and get that. Now, that would be an appointment kind of thing. But if you're having prolonged pain and something's not right, don't waste time. Just go ahead and get to the emergency room. I think everybody would rather see you, than not. I mean, one of the things that I know we're trying to do over in Fort Norfolk is looking at creating a urgent care that's more for chest pain type evaluations. And trying to help the emergency room, because a lot of times they're overwrought with people with chest pain, and there are some people that are higher risk and some that are lower risk. I mean, we want the high-risk people to continue to have those emergency room evaluations, because they could have more serious problem other than just a non-cardiac chest pain. But those lower risk patients, that we try to identify, we want to try to make sure we get them taken care of so they're not sitting in the emergency room for 20 hours and they tell them they're fine, they're going back home.
Sure.
So we're trying to work through some of those dynamics of creating that kind of environment so we can evaluate those people and quickly get them disposition so at least they'll know if it's something serious or not.
Yeah. We have a question that was sent to us on Facebook. They want to know, are the symptoms between men and women different?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. The way I view it is there are, to a certain degree, you can have some women that will say, well, they just have the arm discomfort or back discomfort, but that's really men and women. Both of them can have really atypical type features. I always say,
when you say discomfort, I'm thinking, like you get a twinge. I mean, is it a real serious pressure? Is it, or your mind just kind of tells you this is different from anything else I've felt?
I always say it's more that, the seconds. Because what happens is, the reason why I use discomfort when I was an intern and a resident, you're talking to people and you always hear the term chest pain. So you have somebody comes in the emergency room and they call you up and say, this person's having chest pain. And you go out there and talk to them, are you having chest pain? They say, no. So then you look at them, but I thought they told me you were having pain in your chest. No, I was having pain in my chest. So then you say, okay, then you go back, talk to the doctor, you come back to a patient again, and you say, well, they said you were having pain. No, I'm not having any pain. I never had pain. I'm having pressure. I'm like, I said, what's different? Is it anything you normally feel in your chest? I said, so if you got to where you careful of your terminology.
Okay.
So I say something that's unusual or not something you've experienced before. I need to know that. Mm-hmm. And then, again, knowing that history. I mean, if their father died of a heart attack at 35, I'm going to be paying attention to that seriously. I mean, you take everybody seriously, but there are certain people that are going to be higher risk than others. Mm-hmm. So I always identify those people like that are slightly higher risk. And I'm going to go after them more aggressively because I know that their relative risk is higher. Mm-hmm. But to answer the question about going back to the differences in men and women, there are, but there aren't, because I've had men that come in with stuff that I'm like, oh, that don't even sound even remotely like heart, and it really turns out to be. So I just say the best thing to me to always do is, if you're not sure, it's better just get it checked out to make sure. If it's something that's severe, and I had some people with having like major heart attack, it's really bad pain. I mean, they say, oh, this is like the worst thing in the world. And they have that ashen look about themselves. I mean, you almost see the color changes. Oh, that's to me
serious.
is a sign.
So know that that's what you need to do.
It's wrong.
So when you have your annual checkup during the year, should you always have an EKG? Or how should you get your heart checked? I guess is a better question.
Well, I think what I typically recommend to people is, and every doctor's office is a little different. EKGs are very inexpensive tests. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, and they can give you a lot of good information. But I always say, I think the first step is always, you want to identify those issues that people won't necessarily feel, like blood pressure, potential for diabetes. That's why knowing that family history is so important, because if they're 30 and they have, everybody in their family's diabetic, I'm going to go after them and check them out faster. And more times than not, even though they say they don't have it, you'll find some hint of it. Because even the pre-diabetic patient, a lot of people don't really realize this, but if you have pre-diabetes or borderline diabetes, your risk of heart disease is exactly the same as a full-blown diabetic. Exactly the same. There's no difference.
Wow.
So a lot of people don't realize that. Even some doctors don't even know that. But if you look at the data, it says that if you are diabetic or pre-diabetic, your relative risk is the same. So, if you got we do these things called hemoglobin A1C levels. You get somebody, and when I look at most people that have heart attacks, and they say, oh, I don't understand why I had this because I've never had anything wrong. Blood pressures may be fine, cholesterol levels may be fine, but when you check that A1C level, normally it's a little abnormal, and that is the key.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. What questions do you have about heart disease? Let's talk to Lori in Chesapeake. Hi, Lori. You're on the air.
Hi, doctor. My husband is adopted, and I'm a little bit concerned about his health, but I'm also concerned about my two children's health. And I'm wondering whether you think it's worth trying to find out that background of him, even though it might involve court orders. for adoption agencies?
Well, that one, if you talk about a lot of time and money, it may not necessarily be advantageous for you in the end, but I think that just means you have to be more attuned to his health, meaning, like I say, for heart stuff, it's really not difficult. Just you could check a blood pressure, blood sugar level, your A1C levels, cholesterol levels. Those are the main things we search for. If any of those are elevated, then I would always say it's better to treat as if they had a family history as well. And really, all it's about is control, blood pressure control, blood sugar control, and blood cholesterol control. If you really can get those under wraps, a lot of times their relative risk is going to be lower. Now you can't run from your gene pool, but so much. But if you have those, it's like everything adds a little bit more to the puzzle. So if you could exclude those issues out and get those under control, then your relative risk goes down. Yeah.
Okay. Does that help you, Lori?
It does. I guess also other issues about maybe breast cancer for a daughter and things like that, I guess, is just in the back of my mind.
Yeah, well, I understand. Like any good parent, you are going to worry and be concerned about that. I think what the one nice thing is when you have of course, two parents, that means you're only half of that gene pool is coming from the husband or the other spouse. So your risk, if your family history, then you could that's at least a start. Whether or not that's going to be advantageous, the way I always tell people is you do what you feel is best for you in the end. Because if that's going to give you comfort and peace of mind knowing that information, I say go for it. Go whatever court order you need, because in the end, you don't want to be there. That's your worry. That's your where you end up spending so much time worrying about that when it's just an issue, just getting that peace of mind that you need.
Thanks so much for the call, Lori. We really appreciate that. Another question on Facebook. This person wants to know, what about birth control? Does it impact your heart health?
Not necessarily heart health, but there is some increased risk. Any estrogen component, they say can have some effect on heart disease. But what we'll see more than not is DVT risk, or deep venous thrombosis risk, in people on birth control. But it's not like it's that high a risk. But I think the way I tell people all the time is, if there's no history of anything like that, you never had any blood clots in the leg before, or any of that type of thing, I always tell people, just make sure you're attuned to your body. If you see like a leg that's swollen, it's not usually, it's supposed to be swollen, of course, and that's not usual for you, then that needs to be assessed. And
so the main thing is we really need to pay attention to our bodies and how we feel and how we function on a daily basis, which kind of takes us to the next study that came out this week, which in a nutshell, I think I'm summarizing this correctly, that they're saying now that if you are obese, if you can still control your blood pressure, your cholesterol levels, and so forth through medication, you'll be okay even though you're obese. Do you agree with that?
Well, I won't say you'll be okay, but your risk is markedly reduced. I do agree with that. But we've kind of known that data anyway. This isn't anything new. To be honest with you, we knew that anyway. The problem is convincing patients.
It came out today in Lancet.
Yeah, the problem is convincing patients. I always look at these studies are good if it kind of reemphasizes that, because a lot of times it's hard to convince people of this stuff. You spend a whole office visit sometimes trying to convince people that this stuff impacts. And they'll argue with you tooth and nail about, they don't want to do this medicine, they don't want to do that, and they read in there, get these side effects, and I'm like, listen, the side effects don't mean you're going to have them. They just tell you that's the potential. But when you look at even cholesterol medicine, I get beat up on a regular basis about statin drugs, but there's just another study came out a week or so ago, and they're saying they want almost everybody on statin drugs now.
Yes, I heard that.
For me, I tell people all the time, listen, this is all about prevention. Do you really want to wait till you have a heart attack before you do something about it? Do you want to go through the time being in the hospital, all the things that go with that, and the way from your job, family, to take that kind of risk? I say, when
or
it's
the fact that you could check out.
Yeah,
completely.
It's just all the stuff that goes into this, and if you could just do this, it would potentially prevent.
Are we a society that would much rather pop a pill than to do the hard work. Because what scares me about studies like the one that came out today is that we're basically saying, okay, you can stay obese, but just make sure you take your pills and you'll be okay.
Well, that's why I say I don't look at it as you'll be okay. You're just reducing your risk down. But, of course, if you look at some of the other data, you're talking about people that really, really, really change their lifestyle and they lose all this weight. And they're saying that those people have marked, lessened chance of having major heart issues in the future. The problem is convincing people because it's a lot of work. And it's not easy. And I tell people all the time, listen, this is not a beat up on you session. This is trying to make sure you're educated, know what you need to do to try to get yourself where you want to be. But it's not to beat you up because nobody in this world is perfect, and don't try to be. But you got to understand what you need to do. And that is a challenge. That's a challenge because I get beat up on a regular basis about medications and nobody wants to take it. And you got some that they're on their JOB. You don't have to say anything. They take their medicine, they exercise, they diet, they do everything you ask them to do. But it's just some of the more challenging situations where they just I get somebody comes in with a big boat of vitamins. They'll take 800 of those, spend hundreds of dollars on that stuff, and I get beat up on a $20 copay for a blood pressure pill. And because they think that's natural, I always joke about that. They say it's natural. I'm like, ain't nothing natural about that pill. It's still a pill. It's still a pill. I said, you're not eating roots, and I said that's still something that somebody created.
And I know somebody's going to say, oh, well, depending on how you answer this question, he's just trying to make money. But my question is this: if you go to your primary care physician, you get your annual and so forth, should you see a cardiologist also?
No, I don't think on any regular basis unless your risk is high. I tell people all the time that if you have multiple cardiac risk and you're having symptoms that you're not sure of, we're better suited to deal with that. But if they're just general routine, follow-ups or physicals, I tell people all the time, the way I look at it, my job as a specialist is to help both the primary care physician and the patient to get where they want to be. I have certain degrees of expertise in trying to get there as it relates to blood pressure control, and addressing and assessing what's significant and what's not in somebody's symptoms. Again, we're not perfect on this, but, we do have a little bit more expertise. But I tell people all the time, I say, I can't. If somebody tells me that their ankle's hurting, I'm not going to be able to, help them as much with that as a primary care could, because they deal with that more. But when it comes down to this is my area. This is what I live for. That's the stuff I feel I'm best suited to be able to help people with.
Another Facebook question: is it true that drinking 2 cups of coffee a day improves heart health?
I don't know about that. This is like the red wine thing. That comes into, we talk about red wine because it has antioxidants, so they think that's really improving heart health. And there was some earlier data with that. But the coffee thing, there are certain aspects of the coffee that they do say is supposed to be helpful. They say that coffee is supposed to reduce prostate cancer. But whether or not that really does it, how do you really judge that? It's almost like the only way you can really know, or short of a big study, is you almost have to, have a person, drink coffee. Not drink coffee, see if they develop prostate cancer, turn their hands and come back. You got to go back, that Back to the Future time machine, and then not drink the coffee and see what happens. It's no way you can really, really know the answer to that fully. Because, when I was at Duke, we had studies we would do. I remember it was a heart attack study that talked about if you gave high doses of magnesium, you were saving lives. And we were giving people these massive doses of magnesium in the face of a heart attack because that was this study came out, said that. But then, not even 3 months later, another study came out, totally refuted that data altogether.
But that's one of the points, Keith, because you hear one day, drink coffee, drink wine, don't drink coffee, don't drink wine. You just never know. So is the better message moderation through all of it?
I think it's moderation, but yes, being inquisitive. I never take. I learned from that study that I never take one study and just roll with it. But like the statin drugs, when you talk about cholesterol drugs, there's 8 million studies out there that have said the same thing, that these things, help prevent heart attacks and strokes. So I always say if I get in 2 or 3 good studies that are saying the same thing, then you got to start really paying attention to that. But I do agree with you that moderation and changing lifestyles and all the things that they tell us to do all the time that we rarely ever do, but we're supposed to do it. I mean, if we could follow those guidelines, the exercise, because you look at it, there was a Time Magazine article talking about that a few years ago, and it was the myth of exercise. And a lot of people think, okay, if I just exercise enough, I'll be fine. But they found that people that were exercising more were actually gaining weight because they got hungry after they exercised and they were eating more. So it really has to be a combination of the two. And that's not always easy to do. And like I say, and I tell people all the time, I'm not passing judgment on you because I'm not perfect. I try my best to help you. Say, this is what we need to do. And if you can really try your best, and I try to be supportive of them and say, listen, I'm here for you to try to help you. But if you can do both things, that's going to help you much more.
Okay, we got about 2 minutes left. So let's go back to that Thanksgiving Day dinner.
All right.
What do you want to tell people so that they can go through the holidays, starting with Thanksgiving all the way through New Year's, and try not to gain those 15 pounds?
I think the key thing would be the young lady that called earlier talked about just eating more fruits and vegetables, and that way you're not as hungry by the time you get to the good stuff. I think that stuff is true.
Because starving yourself up to that point is not a good idea.
No, you shouldn't starve yourself. I just say if you just cut back, it just helps you make sure that on the day you're going to go ahead and eat that. You're not going to want as much that particular day. But the key thing is planning out that whole holiday season, because you think about it, you're going to be doing a lot of, going to a lot of events and other people's houses, and they're all going to have all this stuff sitting there waiting for you to eat. And again, it's a couple of weeks of the year. It's just unfortunate. So we're bad all year long. So I think if people could really get to that point and say, okay, I'm going to really stock up on the fruits and vegetables, I'm going to focus on that. Still, you can have the other stuff. Just be careful with how much of it.
And just keep it down. Exactly. And there you go. Thank you so much, as always. And we're going to have you back next week on the 3rd Friday of the month because of the Christmas holiday. So we want to make sure we get some good information in with you. And happy Thanksgiving.
Same to you.
And what's your favorite part of the turkey?
Breast.
The turkey breast.
Yeah, breast meat. I tell you, it's always dry as a bone. I quickly just tell everybody, if you're frying a turkey, don't burn your house down, please.
Yes. Please don't burn your house down. Absolutely. That's Dr. Keith Newby, cardiologist, and our great friend here on Another View, and we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm LaShawn Merritt, and if you want to discuss the issues and celebrate the successes of the African American community, listen to Another View on 89.5.
LaShawn Merritt, thanks so much. One local business owner is all about the business of singing songs that will encourage and inspire others. Our Lisa Godley recently sat down with local singer-songwriter Gwendolyn Thomas, who recently made the transition from church soloist to recording artist.
Music is so powerful in our lives. Music transforms your thinking. Music encourages you when you're down. Music can bring you down if you're encouraged.
Gwendolyn Thomas has been singing since she was a little girl, but it wasn't until her adult years when she started performing at local churches that she decided to take her talent to the next level.
Every time someone invited me to lead praise and worship for a special event or something like that, someone would always come up to me after and say, "Do you have a CD?"
Even then, Gwendolyn dismissed the idea, but it wouldn't be long before that changed.
I ended up in a church where the wife of the gentleman who produced it went to church with us, and she said, "You need to go into the studio." And she had a studio. So I asked them, "How do you know when it's time to do a CD?" And they said, "When people start asking you for one."
Gwen started writing songs in college. One of her favorites is dedicated to her mother, which is track 10 on her CD.
I do not think she'll ever know how I appreciate all the many things she's done.
In addition to writing many praise and worship songs, Gwen has also written a 30-cast musical drama that she directed and named Judgment Day.
I don't sit down to write songs. A lot of times I'm either in prayer or I'm crying about something that I'm going through that's very difficult for me, or I'm driving down the road and praising God for what I've come through or what He's doing that's a blessing in my life. And the words will come to me with the sound.
Gwendolyn titled her debut CD, Just Real. When she's not performing, the wife and mother of two is running her own consulting firm, Quality Measures, LLC. With such a busy life, she says people are always surprised when she tells them that she has to spend time encouraging herself.
I come across so confident. When people look at me or they talk to me and they realize I've been doing all these things, I have my own consulting business, I'm producing music, I have a PhD, and they look at all of my accomplishments and they say, oh, she must be confident, she must be this, she must be that. But the reality is I struggle with that, and I have to encourage myself every day. When I first started the CD, I just wanted it to bless people. One of the reasons I believe that I was given this assignment to actually produce that CD with the songs that came to me is because a lot of times being a Christian gets really, really hard. Sometimes the words in the Bible don't feel like they're going to get you through. But if you trust and you just have to hold on to just a little bit, if you hold on to a little bit or take just one more step, you find yourself at a different place. So I wanted it to be real about being a Christian and walking by faith and trusting God.
She says if just one of her songs encourages one person, it was worth it.
I believed two things. One, that God blessed me with these songs. He certainly gave me my voice because I didn't sit at a lineup and pick the one I wanted, or I would have had somebody else's voice. And if He gave me these songs with this voice, then He has an audience for it.
Wonder if it's really gonna be all right. But I gotta believe that if I hold on to just a little bit of faith, God's gonna do what He said and guide me while He makes a way. Challenges come and challenges go, but Jesus loves me, and this I know.
For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
The fun part about doing Another View, Keith, is just bringing something uplifting to the audience. So I hope that you all enjoyed that story from Lisa Godley. And I also want to give a shout out today to Alicia Abdullah Sears, who is a junior communications major at Regent University, and Daniqua Washington. She's a senior broadcast journalism major at Hampton University. And these two young ladies are shadowing Lisa and I today so they can find out what it's like in the real world of broadcast. So thank you, ladies, for coming. We appreciate that. And that's it for this edition of Another View on Health. We hope we've given you some workable tips to keep your weight in check while you enjoy this holiday season. If you'd like to hear the show again, simply visit anotherviewradio.org and download the podcast. And while you're there, sign up for our eView newsletter. It's a once-a-week reminder of upcoming programs. And if you haven't already, please like us on Facebook. Next week, the Another View staff will enjoy Thanksgiving with family and friends. So we have a pre-recorded program for you. We'll introduce you to a group of vintage Virginians, as John Rothrock with the Virginia Department of Aging and Rehabilitative Services calls senior citizens. I like that, vintage Virginians. These folks say age is nothing but a number. You will be inspired. Our theme music was composed and produced by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Victor Bowen is our audio engineer, and Danny Epperson answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. We'll be back live in 2 weeks. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. And let's get together again next Friday at noon for Another View.